Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Cancer Immunotherapy and You patient webinar series. I am your host Dr. Rajit Muley, and today we are going to discuss the topic of navigating cancer immunotherapies, exploring the world of mRNA vaccines. It is my great pleasure to introduce our guest for today, Dr. Vinod Balachandran from Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Dr. Balachandran is Associate Attending Department of Surgery, Hepatopancreatobiliary Services and Associate Member, Human Oncology and Pathogenesis Program. He is also member of David M. Rubinstein Center for Pancreatic Cancer Research at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Welcome, Dr. Balachandran. It's a great pleasure to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Without further ado, Doctor, I would like to start by asking, what is immunotherapy, specifically in terms of cancer immunotherapy?
So for cancer, the way cancers form is when a normal cell in the body becomes abnormal, then divides and spreads. And historically, the scientific community has been developing many different ways to kill these abnormal cancer cells. And one of the first discoveries was that these abnormal cancer cells divide faster than normal cells.
Yeah.
So this led to the development of drugs that kill cells that divide faster, and these are chemotherapies.
Right.
And one of the next major discoveries was when scientists discovered that one of the changes that instruct a normal cell to become abnormal are breaks in the DNA or a mutation that instructs a cancer cell to divide and spread. So this now led to the development of drugs that then block these mutations, and this is another type of therapy that we use that is called targeted therapies. Right. Now, what we have also learned in recent years is that although these mutations instruct cancer cells to divide and spread, they can also be their Achilles heel because the immune system can recognize these mutations as foreign and kill cancers. And this has now led to the development of drugs that boost this immune recognition of cancer mutations. And these general group of therapies that boost the immune system's ability to recognize and kill cancers are the latest class of drugs in our armamentarium of drugs to fight cancer, the immune therapies.
Oh, lovely. So we have been hearing a lot of buzz about cancer vaccines, specifically mRNA vaccines. So we want to know, what is cancer vaccine?
Sure. So the idea to develop or teach the immune system to recognize a cancer has been one of the most sought after challenges in modern oncology. And this is partly arises from the knowledge that vaccines have been among the most successful medicines to prevent disease in all of human history. The ability to use the body's ability to recognize something as foreign and use the body's ability to remember anything that is foreign and recognize and kill it if it reoccurs.
So do the vaccines work like flu vaccines work?
Right. So historically, vaccines have been primarily used to protect the body against anything that is foreign, primarily pathogens. So this is bacteria, viruses, and other pathogens. And the way vaccines work is that when the human body, the immune system, sees a pathogen, either a virus or a bacteria, a special type of immune cell called a T cell recognizes these foreign pathogens and then expands to clear the virus or the pathogen. And then after the threat is cleared, they contract and they stick around in the body for decades, re-expanding if the threat reoccurs. So for infections, this can happen with T cells as well as another type of immune cell called B cells. And what we have now also learned in recent years is these same cells that can fight and recognize infection can also fight and recognize cancer. So if you can teach the body to protect the body from an infection by giving a small piece of the infection beforehand and expanding these cells and giving the memory of this infection to be existing in the body, then why would you not be able to do this in cancer? So this theoretically should be possible, but the how has been the major challenge for the field.
Sure. So are there like different kinds of vaccines? Because we heard the flu vaccine is different from the COVID vaccine that we have seen has been so important in saving us from the COVID pandemic. So are there different kind of cancer vaccines also?
Right. So the critical component for any vaccine is to be able to teach the immune system to recognize something as foreign, and for that memory of something as foreign to last for very long periods of time. The way vaccines do this is when immune cells recognize something as foreign, they do so by recognizing foreign proteins that are found on these cells called an antigen. So these antigens is what the immune system recognizes as foreign, and when it sees an antigen, the cells expand, they kill the foreign threat, and then the cells contract and they last. So by delivering the antigen using a variety of different delivery platforms, you can expand the cells and create the memory in the host. So in pathogens, you can do this for flu. And so in flu vaccines, they use an antigen against the influenza virus to give the body memory against the influenza virus. The same strategy is employed for COVID vaccines by giving a small piece of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, the antigen, to teach the immune system to recognize the SARS-CoV-2 virus if it infects the host. Now, the challenge to using vaccines for cancer has been because unlike pathogens, which are inherently foreign, they're not part of us, a cancer cell is part of us. It is intrinsically a self. So in order to develop a cancer vaccine, what we have to actually do is teach the immune system to exquisitely recognize the aspects of the cancer cell that are the most non-self, or most foreign. At the same time, not teaching the immune system to start attacking ourselves.
Right.
And this is challenging because our immune systems are inherently programmed to not attack ourselves. So this has been a big challenge for the field of cancer vaccines, namely finding the antigen that can teach the immune system to recognize a cancer, and a delivery platform that can give these antigens to strongly teach the immune system to do so. And in recent years, there have been some major breakthroughs in both of these aspects.
That's lovely. So can you just tell us what kind of cancers can be treated with cancer vaccines? Is it available for many different type of cancers, or are there specific cancers that these cancer vaccines work better for?
So right now, the area for cancer vaccines where there have been the most progress are in cancers that develop because of a virus that has infected a normal cell and causing that cell to become cancerous. And the most widely used cancer vaccine in this case, really to prevent the virus and not actually, and thus prevent the cancer, is the human papillomavirus vaccine, HPV vaccine, which is now used. And although there have been similar, there also have been vaccines which have been approved for certain types of cancers. By and large, cancer vaccines are not fully available yet as approved cancer drugs for patients, because right now we are still very deeply in the phases of understanding how might we in fact do this in a safe and effective way for a patient. So this is where the research field is right now.
Right. So we are talking of safety. So are there any side effect and safety factors that people have to be concerned about when it comes to cancer vaccines?
Right. So in any for any new medicine that is being tested for a patient, these new medicines have to go through a series of clinical studies in patients after extensive testing of these drugs in other systems, just smaller animals such as mice and so on. And once these drugs are deemed as safe in these earlier studies, then they progress onwards to saying, okay, we now feel they are safe enough and we have enough evidence that they may work in these other systems before testing them in patients. And in patients, there's a series of phases of clinical trials that we test these drugs in. And the first phase is always to establish safety. So this will be the first question that we must answer, is make sure that these drugs are not harming patients before we can in fact test to see whether or not they might be helping. Now for cancer vaccines, or for vaccines in general, with the more recent advances in RNA technology, as well as the widespread application of RNA technology to make vaccines against pathogens, primarily SARS-CoV-2, this has now given us a lot of information on how safe RNA is for vaccines. And what we have learned through this is the current RNA vaccine strategies are very safe. So we feel comfortable that we can successfully or safely rather use RNA technology to develop vaccines against cancer. But of course, this is something that needs to be actually tested through clinical studies in patients.
So what I'm hearing is there is a lot of work that is going on in mRNA vaccines, specifically in terms of treating cancers. So what kind of cancers are we researching on right now? What is actively being worked on?
Right. So it is a very exciting time for the field of cancer vaccines, because there have been several major breakthroughs in both those two critical components which are essential for an effective vaccine, namely finding the right antigen and finding a right delivery platform that can give this antigen to patients and boost a very strong immune response in the patient. And right now, there have been essentially two major areas of types of cancers that have been investigated. One type of cancer are these cancers which tend to have lots of these mutations in them. So you can think of this as lots of targets for the immune system to see, and thus lots of targets to include in vaccines to teach the immune system to see these cancers. And these include cancers such as melanoma and lung cancer. Now, our own work has been focused on another type of a group of cancers which have fewer mutations, where historically the thinking had been that these cancers may not be suitable for such vaccines because they have few mutations, and thus the immune system would not be able to see them. But some of our work has discovered that these cancers, in fact, do have mutations that are sufficient to teach the immune system to recognize them. And the one that we have been working on is pancreatic cancer.
Oh, that's interesting, because we have heard that pancreatic cancer is an enigma. Like it's hard to detect, it is hard to treat. So, like, if we are able to find out a cure or try to prevent it using a cancer vaccine, that I think would be really amazing. So, are there any considerations for patients that possibly might want to get recruited for your clinical trials, or that might be looking forward for these vaccines?
Right. So for pancreatic cancer, as you mentioned, pancreatic cancer is a deadly cancer, soon to become the second leading cause of cancer death in the United States by 2025. So surpassing cancer deaths from many other common cancers, such as breast cancer, prostate cancer, ovarian cancer, melanoma, so second only to lung cancer. And part of the reason for this has been that pancreatic cancer the current treatments for pancreatic cancer include surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation, but despite these best current treatments, outcomes remain still not very good. Despite best treatments, about 90% of patients die within 5 years of diagnosis, so really needs urgent new drugs. So this has been part of our motivation to develop potentially new treatments, immune therapies, and vaccines for pancreatic cancer. So we recently completed the first clinical trial to use mRNA vaccines to treat pancreatic cancer. This was a phase 1 clinical trial that we completed here at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. We had encouraging results where we showed that these vaccines were safe in patients. You can deliver them on time to patients because these were individualized vaccines, so you had to custom make them in real time for every single patient. And we were also able to learn that these vaccines could teach patients' immune systems to very strongly recognize their cancers. So this is currently now moved on to a larger clinical trial, which is happening both at Memorial Sloan Kettering as well as globally. So if patients are interested, there are instructions on our website on how they would contact us to consider eligibility for this clinical trial.
And so another question that comes in my mind is it like, can we use cancer vaccines to prevent from happening cancer, or is it like a therapeutic vaccine?
Right. Yeah, this has been this can be a potentially confusing point, because in infectious diseases, we typically use vaccines to prevent the disease, meaning you get a vaccine against the SARS-CoV-2 virus to prevent yourself from getting the COVID disease. Now, in cancer, what we have been largely talking about here are vaccines that are later on in the disease process, meaning patients who already have cancer, who have been treated for this cancer using some current treatments, such as, for example, surgery, and then the vaccine would be used to prevent these cancers from coming back after surgery. So secondary prevention, if you will. We think that by doing these initial studies in secondary prevention, learning how could you make a vaccine to potentially prevent cancer from coming back after surgery, could open up the possibility to then learn how to, in fact, make preventative vaccines. So this is something that you would explore further down the line.
That's exciting. So are there any other cancers that you're working on right now for making these cancer vaccines?
I think part of the exciting implications of our finding in pancreatic cancer was that the antigens that we did the vaccines against are derived from mutations, and these mutations, breaks in the DNA, are a fundamental feature of all cancers.
Right.
So if you can teach the immune system to recognize a fundamental feature of all cancers, as illustrated by pancreatic cancer, you could theoretically make a vaccine to teach the immune system to recognize any potential cancer. So this has been the exciting part of it. Of course, this needs to be tested and investigated, so we're now currently testing in a variety of different cancer types.
So another question comes in my mind is, a lot of cancer patients have comorbidities. Some of them are immunocompromised, some of them have allergies. So is that a consideration when somebody would like to, as and when these cancer vaccines get developed further and they are available, will that be a consideration? Will patient have to be screened out for specific immune system disorders?
Right. So this comes back to the number one consideration when we are treating patients with any medicine, especially in investigational medicine, is to make sure that we do no harm.
Yeah.
So here, if there are other medical conditions in patients that we think might make the vaccines unsafe, then yes, this would be something that we would not want to do, because we do not want to hurt patients with these drugs. So every immune therapy, including vaccines, has some criteria where at this time, since it's earlier days, we think these medical conditions might make these drugs a little bit more unsafe. But of course, over time, as we learn more and more about these drugs, then we might have these inclusion and exclusion criteria, namely what types of conditions might make these drugs more or less safe, might evolve. So this will be something that we will learn with time and evolve with time.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Balachandran. Is there anything else that you want to share with our patients today?
I think it is certainly a very exciting time for cancer immunotherapy in general. We are squarely in the era of cancer immunotherapy where we have now learned and proven that the immune system can recognize cancer in patients, and you can in fact make drugs to boost the immune system's ability to recognize and kill cancer. And the first class of drugs these are the highly successful immune checkpoint inhibitors, which was most of which was really spearheaded by efforts by the CRI. Has really made this point, proven this point. This is a fundamental and really remarkable achievement for the field and wonderful for patients. But what we are now facing is, these class of immune therapies, the checkpoint inhibitors, they work in about 20% or so of cancer patients. So we really need new medicines for the other 80% of cancer patients where these drugs don't work. And we're very excited about the possibility of using vaccines against cancer for at least some fraction of these patients.
No, for sure, sir. And I'm definitely assured that with great work from guys like you, we are in safe hands, and we will definitely try to catch up with the leftover 20% of patients who cannot get treated right now. But cancer vaccines, I guess, is the news for tomorrow, and definitely we should keep on looking forward for the mRNA vaccines and how it unfolds.
Yes, very, very exciting time indeed.
Thank you so much, sir.
Great chatting.